Welcome back to another video. I'm Akhil. I'm working on expanding the scope and scale of productivity in my current company of Adaro Solutions. I know that none of the flyers that are usually here are up, and that's because I recently moved apartments. And my printer is not functioning, so that's a little bit besides the point. But yeah, basically my printer's not functioning, so I didn't get to put up the new piece of paper. But anyway, aside from that, in this video, we're gonna be talking about everything that happened since the last video. It's quite a bit. It's been like about a month and maybe month and a couple weeks or something like that since I filmed the last one, and a ton has happened. So I got a couple trials. Both of them ended up canceling, and I'm going to outline what happened and exactly what caused them to cancel and what improvements I made to the system too. And I made a ton of improvements. I made, improved the metric system. I made a bunch of stuff because I noticed many failure points during those two trials and, transferring from spot to spot, stuff like that. Anyway, aside from that, we're going to be talking about how, I turned 21. We're going to be talking about, a bunch of other tangential stuff, the female question part 4. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. So yeah, stay tuned to the video and let's get into the video. So first things first, let's go over basically everything that happened since the last video. So since the last video, basically I started. So basically, there was a marketing company that was also using automations on there. So this is like the marketing company that was having issues. I went in and then I reviewed because they gave me access obviously to their Go High Level. So I went in and I just wanted to review what kind of automations they were using, and I went through and I found a couple things that I could kind of basically like use in my own system to make it a little bit better. And one of them was automatically sending not interested messages, not for the SPA system, but for my cold text reach outs. Because when I'm cold texting like thousands of leads, a lot of them reply with no or not interested or please stop texting me, stuff like that. And for those, I obviously like sending like copy pasted message like, okay, like no worries at all. Appreciate you letting me know. If you ever are interested, our contact information is XY. This is our phone number. That's what I like to send as a message. So I basically noticed that you can actually automatically program GHL to do that on your behalf. So if somebody replies, like let's just say I sent you a cold text and you reply with no, the GHL says I wouldn't have to sit down and then copy and then paste the message and then click send. I know that sounds like it's simple. Well, we're just copy pasting a message. But like when you're talking about like if I'm sending 2,000 texts at a time, and then I'm sending like 1,000 texts at a time. I'm going to get into it, but I upped it to 2,000. But anyway, let's just say I send 1,000 texts. I might be getting like 50 to 100 not interested. It's like there's a lot of not interested people. For me to sit down and copy paste every single one, I end up missing the people who are interested, stuff like that. So having the system automatically recognize when somebody says no or not interested and automatically send that message out is really helpful. And I got that automation technique from viewing the other marketers' automations. So yeah, that's what happened on one of the. That was like a couple days after I filmed the video from last time, last month. Yeah, and I just kept doing other cold texting, stuff like that. It was around the New Year's time actually. And then basically around that same time I got another interested lead who was I think I talked about it in the last video too, but I was pretty sure was going to start a trial, and she did end up starting the trial very slowly though. It took a few days for her to like give me all the information, and then I finally started. I did like a bunch of calls for her. I did end up basically what I ended up doing is there was like this weekly report I was sending out that would basically break down. So this is one of the things that I ended up deleting after I noticed that it was taking up a long time. What I thought was, okay, I'm sending out this data every single day, but for a spot owner, they're not really able to interpret the data very well, or at least they don't pay enough attention. So I thought, okay, if I send a weekly, like kind of like breaking down what we noticed from the leads, that might be helpful. What I noticed is that it's not. They just end up not reading the email. It's just a wasted effort on my part. And let's just say it takes me like 15 minutes every week. When you start to add up spas, like this is like, when you start to add up, spot for spot, it becomes like, okay, now like at one point I had 3 spas that I was working with, right? When I had the 2 trials. Okay, when you try to do that weekly for 3 spas, it just becomes like a big pain in the ass when you combine all the shit. So I ended up deleting that around this time. And then I also was struggling with like this A2P. We're gonna get into that too, but A2P has been. I basically have like a figured out solution now, but it took a lot of iteration to get there. and I'm going to go over exactly what I did there. So yeah, and then I basically, so once I started this trial, I started migrating the current automation. This is gonna this video is gonna be pretty long. It's gonna get kind of into the details, but it's worth doing. I started migrating a lot of the automations from one spa account to the other spa account, and I realized I had to consolidate a lot of things. I had to delete a lot of extra automations that don't do anything. I had to really solidify what I was trying to deliver. There's a lot of solidification, consolidation, deletion going on when I did the first spa to spa kind of automation transfer, setting up that new spa. I also when we were talking last video, we were talking about the auto scrubber and how eventually Google recognizes it. Well, Google basically, they stopped. They did recognize it at one point, but then I went back and I created another account like 2 or 3 weeks later, and I guess basically they just don't. I don't know. It was maybe like they just didn't recognize it anymore. But I was able to create another account, so I finished off that last. I don't know. I forgot how many queries. I think it was like 500, 600 queries. I finished off those last queries. I also did Texas, all of those queries, and then I also have another plan. I'm actually running another auto scrubber now for a new set of things, which I'll probably get into at some point, but maybe at the end of all this. There's a lot that happened. The last month has been a lot. It's just been a lot. Okay, so yeah. Aside from that, basically, I started onboarding this spa, and then I started realizing, okay, well, I need to separate a couple of documents internally. So like, if I'm going to offload this to another person, I'm going to need to be able to have separate, it needs to be clear instructions. Like there needs to be template responses. There needs to be a separate internal sheet, just kind of having, notes like about that spa. There needs to be a separate sales sheet that is not related to the onboarding sheet, because it doesn't make sense to have a sales sheet and an onboarding sheet in the same. It just makes it complicated. So I separated those two, and I have directions for each now. And then I created this whole checklist, because I realized, I was like, okay, there's a lot of rules of thumb that I'm having in my head. Like, okay, when I do this, when I move from this spot to this spot, there's like 8 things I need to remember. So I just like, okay, this is good. I'm gonna either forget, and this is gonna be like super complicated. If I'm trying to tell somebody how to do this, it's better just to have a checklist. So I created this giant checklist. It's not really that big. It's just like maybe 20 or 25 things that when I'm going from one spa to another spa, I remember to do all these things, and that's what I need for this next spa. So yeah, that's obviously I created that. So now that's easy. When I go to set up a new spa, I just copy paste the automations, go through the checklist, make sure all the things are set, and that's it. It makes it a lot easier. I simplified a lot of different things there, especially in the spa to spa migration. There was like a whole host of things that I simplified. It'd be like a 30-minute video just going through all the little things that I simplified, as far as like email sending name to be automatic, email sending, like the domain thing. There's so many things that I simplified to make it very simple and easy to go from spa to spa without very much. There's obviously going to be some complexity because every spa is like slightly, they have different names, stuff like that. But I made it as simple as I could. So now if let's just say, for example, I get a new spa, I might be able to, once they give me all the login information and everything, I might be able to, in my personal time, it might take like 2 or 3 hours for me to actually set up the spa for the follow-ups. So which is drastically reduced, because like this first trial spa took probably like 7 to 8 hours to set up in total over multiple days. So yeah. There's a lot of iterations on the A2P thing, the compliance bullshit too. Like I said, I'll get into that in a bit. After that, I got so basically around that time, I set up the entire spa, and I was just kind of waiting on this lady to give me like a couple different pieces of information, and she wasn't responding, which is never a really good sign, but she wasn't responding at the time. It was like 2 or 3 days that she just wasn't responding. It was like around January 1st. It's actually January 4th. So January 4th, a lot of people like out of town, I guess. They were like on the holidays. So none of my leads were really like, responding. Like the lead that wanted to do the trial wasn't really responding. There was nothing really going on in the spa because during the holiday times, the lead volume is completely down. I already did my 1,000 cold texts for the day. So I got really, really bored. So I just decided, fuck it. And then I just blasted out 4,000 extra cold texts in that same day. In hindsight, that was kind of a bad idea. But I did it, and actually, it was interesting because I basically stress tested all the automations that I had set up, and I realized how much more efficient I could be and get the same like I could do way more volume with the same amount of effort. And the way is, I basically set up a bunch of like automatic. One was the not interested thing, but then on the interested side, I think I'm getting I'm getting confusing here. So this is for cold text. Outside of the SPA stuff, stop the SPA stuff for a second. We're going back to cold texting businesses. I think I have to make this a little bit more clear because I'm kind of like, switching between like 8 different things here, and it's probably getting really confusing. But so I sent 5,000 cold texts to outside businesses, right? The lead sources, like new leads. And the reason I did that was because I was bored, which is never a good reason to do anything. But yeah, I was really bored. I didn't have anything to do, so I was like, fuck it, let's just send more cold texts. And I did. It wasn't like, oh, let's just go, 500 more. Like, you should be going gradually. You should be like, okay, 1,000. Okay, let's send 500 more. 500. I just got like, I don't know. I was like fed up with not having multiple spots. So I just did 5,000 at once, or 4,000. I had sent 1,000 already, and I just did 4,000 all at once. And then basically what ended up happening is I stress tested my systems. It wasn't smart to do 5,000 at once. I could have stress tested it with just 1,000 or 2,000 extra, but I did 5,000 at once, which wasn't really smart in hindsight. But at the end of the day, it ended up solving the problem. It ended up helping me in the long run, because what that stress testing allowed was that it showed me how many things I could improve. And one, like I said, was that not interested thing where it automatically sends not interested messages. But the second thing was for interested people. I get a lot of interested people, but for basically what it works is I tag them as interested, and then I have to go into their contacts, set a custom follow-up so that I follow up with them the next day. And that gets progressively more and more annoying when you're talking about when you have like 35 people responding as interested, or they say yes or send me information. It just becomes really annoying to have to sit down and then go through and add a task, and a lot of people don't respond the next. It's just like very annoying. So the easy way is I created a system where like I copy paste the message, tag them. The tag automatically creates a custom task for the next day, and then automatically reminds me to follow up with them the next day. So I know that sounds a little weird, probably pretty confusing, but basically, it saves me like a long time, and it makes it so easy to do the cold texts. And it allows me now. Before, I was probably able to send about 1,000 cold texts before a lot of messages start to come in my inbox, and I start to not be able to reply to people fast. Now I can probably easily send 2,000 to 3,000 a day without that happening. So I can increase my sending rate, and therefore my ability to get more trials by having those automations. So yeah, and then I finally onboarded the spa. Took like 2 or 3 days. And then the free trial went well. And basically, the thing is, so objectively, what I can say is the system worked perfectly. Like on her trial, I'm going to go over what happened kind of, I guess, right now. So this is what happened. So she signed this spa owner signed up for the free trial, and she basically wasn't really paying attention to the free trial like at all. She's one of those really hands-off owners that kind of owns their place, but like, I don't know what she does during the day, but she's really not paying attention to the spa at all. So after the free trial was over, every single day I was sending her a report. I was trying to get her thoughts, but she just wasn't responding. But after the free trial, a couple days went by. I stopped the follow-ups, and then she reached back out to me, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you guys, you did a great job. Blah blah blah. We'd be happy to do your service. Just if you could help me out with this." It was just like some connection shit. She wanted to have the data on her side too. It's zero extra work on my part. I just gave her access to her system. Blah blah blah. And then she paid for the service. And then like a few days later, she was like, "Oh, I don't really like this type of messaging. It's too standardized. I want a service that can answer custom questions and give like treatment advice and stuff like that." And I was like, okay, that's completely fine. We had a free trial. You did pay for the service, but if you really are not happy with the service, I'm happy to refund you. The thing is, and I did refund her. She was like, "Oh yeah, I don't want the service. Please refund me." And I was like, okay, fine. At this point, I did. So I set her up on a permanent spa account. I went through the automations. I did a free trial. The free trial went well. We got tons of bookings. Now we're like 3 or 4 days into the normal paid service. And then I gave her a refund, obviously, for everything she paid, which, hey, obviously I'm the loser here because, I gave her a bunch of free work for her and bookings. But, at the end of the day, whatever. That's just, at the end of the day, if a customer's asking for a refund, unless it's like unreasonable, in this case, the truth is, if I objectively look at it, before we started helping her, she had 10s, 20, 30, hundreds of DMs that were being missed. She had, I was going through like the stuff that like on the first day, and she had tons of ad leads being missed, tons of website forms being missed. And then throughout the free trial, we got multiple bookings. The system works perfectly. Everything went pretty well. Objectively, she got way more bookings than before. But, once the free trial ended, I stopped obviously the follow-ups because she hasn't responded yet. And then in those 3 or 4 days that the free trial was stopped, I can't tell you, there's so many leads that just wanted to book, but literally nobody was responding from their business. So literally a lead would be like, okay, I'd like to schedule for Saturday or something, and then they wouldn't get a reply for 3 days until she redid the services. I don't know, but anyway, and then the thing is, objectively speaking, as a business, you don't want to be sitting. You don't want to have a nurse level, you don't want to have a medical level professional answering questions on DMs. You want it to be the person who answers the DMs is somebody who just is simply answering them to get them scheduled to a consultation at the spa. You don't want to be answering, medical questions over Instagram messages. It doesn't make much sense. You don't want to be giving a consultation over Instagram messages. It doesn't, logically, it doesn't make sense to even do that from a business perspective. And it doesn't make sense to it doesn't make sense to pay a full-time nurse to just answer messages. It'd make more sense just to have a normal a normal person that is just scheduling a consultation to a nurse. But, whatever that person wants to run their business, objectively, like I said, compared to before, whatever she was doing, we got way more bookings, objectively. But, some people just, they have their business, they want to do it the way they want to do it. That's completely fine. She wants the messages to be custom and answered by a nurse. What can I say? I can't do that. That's not physically possible. And we only deliver standardized responses to book into simple. We only deliver simple responses and book into a calendar. It's not physically possible for me to do what it's not physically possible for anybody to deliver this type of service that she's requesting. Nor would it be cost effective in any meaningful way. So in terms of logically, there's nothing really I should change about the system, because like I said, by any measurable metrics that I measure that I want to achieve with my system, it worked perfectly under that situation. So the rest of it is just okay, that's just personal preference. It's just not a fit. It's just my service was not a fit for her spa. That's what happened in the first trial. And during the first trial, I also set up my second trial. And so this other lead was I think in Wisconsin or something. And they were also having a similar thing where they wanted, somebody to help follow up with their leads, all that, blah, 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 blah. So this time around, the setup was way faster because I fixed a lot of the stuff from spa to spa. The first time I went from, one spa to 2 spa, I fixed a lot of the stuff. So this next setup was much faster. And then I also fixed, obviously, some other stuff after that spa setup. But yeah, this one was faster. So I set the spa up. We started the free trial. Everything was going good. We actually got, the funny thing about that spa, I can just go over what happened. So the funny thing about that spa is I actually got a booking every single day for that spa. And that was because their offer was really good. I think I actually got, over the 7 days that we did the trial, I think we got 8 bookings or 7 bookings. So 7 or 8 bookings over the 7 days we got the trial. So that was a booking every single day. And, everything, in terms of follow-up responses, in terms of time to the lead, in terms of every metric that I want my system to accomplish for a business, it accomplished pretty much perfectly, everything was done well, as far as you can't, objectively speaking, again, I saw the follow-ups that they were doing before our system. I saw the follow-ups after the system. Objectively speaking, before the system, leads were getting called sporadically. They were people would respond and then they might get a response hours or days later. People were getting booked very slowly. It's just objectively, under any measurable way, that they were losing leads. That they're paying for advertising and losing leads. And then when our system came in, they got a booking every single day, and everything was objectively working very well. But this specific spa, their offer was actually they were offering a free service, literally a completely free. They had one of the best offers I've ever seen in terms of getting people in, because they were offering a completely free treatment. It was a $100 or $150 treatment completely for free. But I think this spa, because after the trial, basically they really liked the service, but I don't know. I guess they just couldn't afford it, because basically they were an unprofitable business essentially, because they were explaining to me that essentially they are running basically a loss or something. They're running at a loss. So they I don't know. I guess they just couldn't afford the service, which I didn't realize at the start. But essentially they're paying money for ads to get these people into a free treatment, and then they do try to get them onto a monthly membership. But I suppose at this free treatment, many don't actually sign up for this monthly membership. So their conversions, they're not really converting. They're running ads and they're getting bookings, but they're not able to actually convert those bookings into real money. They're just basically selling a free service. They're essentially running a charity basically. So essentially they couldn't afford. Because they basically, the one main thing that they kept coming back to, like after obviously the free trial, I had a follow-up call with them. I was like, hey, can I get some feedback on it? Yeah, I know you guys don't want to move forward. That's completely fine. Can I just get some feedback? What do you guys thought about the system? And basically the only sticking thing that they said was like, oh, they kept saying superficial things like, oh, some of your conversations are kind of dry, but they do result in bookings, so that's really great. But some of them were kind of dry. Like, what does dry mean? Like, I mean, we got the booking, so like, I mean, I don't understand. Like, do you want us to there was no like constructive criticism on like, hey, you can do this so you can get more bookings, or you can do this to. It was just like, basically, it wasn't real criticism, or it wasn't real feedback. It was just kind of like, it was kind of a brush off, and then they kind of like kept repeating back that they're spending money on ads every single day, and it's kind of expensive, and they're not able to kind of really afford a follow-up service. So I guess they're kind of just softly saying that they had no ability to pay for a monthly service, even though it was getting bookings, because even though they get bookings, they're offering a free treatment. They're not really able to convert many of those people who are getting the free treatment into a paid monthly membership, or into more expensive treatments. So they're basically essentially saying that even though you're booking a ton of people, we're not able to convert those people profitably. So we essentially can't pay for your service, even though you're doing lots of bookings. But again, that's just not really, that has nothing to do with my system. That's just more of like, okay, for this specific business, again, it's just not a fit again. But yeah, at least there's nothing I can see. Like fundamentally, I did under every metric that I can measure, like, okay, have we gotten more bookings? Have we, the lead time, like how fast are we responding to leads? How many, like, are all the lead, like, as far as like responses, are they within variations that I already predefined, or are we getting a ton of variation in terms of like response? Like, what are the conversions clear? Are they, is it repeatable? Is it, you see what I'm saying? Like, all the metrics that actually like make a good system, I basically, I feel like I did right. Like I don't feel like, anything like the core service is not flawed. You see what I mean? Like, if the core service was flawed, we wouldn't be getting bookings. If the core service was flawed, then we'd get a ton of people who really don't like us. If the core service was flawed, then we'd have less bookings and less, responses than before we started. But all of those things are not true. We have more bookings than when they started. We have better response times than when before we started. We have better response rates. Like, people replying back to us than before before our system was implemented. So objectively speaking, there was a positive return. It's just that they were not able to profitably use that return, which is not really a measure of the service that I provide. It's really just a measure of them not being able to run a profitable business. But anyway, it's getting too much into the details. Point is, both of the trials were not a fit. But that what I learned from those trials was like amazing, because, like I said, the standardization. Okay, a couple big things that I did around this time. And this is a few. Getting these trials was a great forcing function for me to really figure out a lot of the shit that I was doing pretty stupid. It was a great forcing function for me to standardize, for me to eliminate, to consolidate, and to iterate. So one of the things that I iterated on was, well, there's actually a lot, so this is going to be a little while of me just telling you stuff that I iterated on. One of the biggest things was iterating on this A2P compliance bullshit. So let's go back to square one. What the hell is A2P compliance bullshit that I keep talking about? Well, in order to send text messages in the United States of America, and I guess Canada too, you need to have this thing called A2P approval compliance, whatever you want to call it. You need to get approved by Twilio, which is a carrier, it's a telephone carrier. You need to get approved by these guys in order to send text messages. And if you don't get approved by them, you are unable to send text messages at all. So basically the entire SPA, like the entire lead follow-up system, rests on the fact that I get this approval. Because if I don't get this approval, then I can't run the system, because I can't send text messages. So, I can't start a SPA until I get approved on this text message bullshit compliance. So both of these SPAs, I tried to get, basically the way that works, in order to get approval, you have to enter in your business, information like your EIN number. So for the SPA, I'd have to enter in their SPA EIN number, their SPA legal business name, and then once you get like the brand, that's called brand approval. Once like they verify that you're a legitimate business, then they ask you, okay, it's called a campaign approval. This is the most shittiest part. So the campaign approval is just, they're going to ask you, okay, what kind of wording are you going to use? Like, what are the sample messages? Okay, what is the use case description? Like, how are you going to use these messages? What are you doing? Are you cold? What are you doing? They have to verify that it falls under their allowed use cases. Then they're going to ask you for how do contacts opt in. You need to provide a live link, like a literal, like a URL to a website where they can verify that there is the correct opt-out information, the correct consent information, all this bullshit, okay? And you basically, if you don't have all of these, if you don't have everything A to Z dialed, then they're going to reject you. And I kid you not, it takes fucking 4 days or 5 days most of the time. So you submit the application. It takes 4 to 5 days before you get an answer on if you're approved or rejected. If you get rejected, you have to go back to square one. You have to look through everything that you did wrong. You have to, they're going to send you a very generic, here, you got this wrong. It's so broad that it could literally be like one of 3 or 4 different things. So you have to test changing one of those 3 or 4 different things, redo it, wait 3 or 4 more days until you get approved or get denied, and then you have to go again. So this, you can imagine this is like fucking hell. Okay, so basically the solution that I ended up doing for both of these spas at first was just, I already had pre-approved. So basically I approved text messages on my personal business account name, EIN number. They were already approved before, their backup accounts, and I loaded these spas onto these backup accounts, and then I started sending text messages and doing all of the work from these approved backup accounts, right? So when I did this, that's fine temporarily, but over time, if the Twilio, they're gonna eventually catch on that this is the business that you're doing reach outs for, like. It's going to have a different business name than your EIN number and the business thing that you submitted. So eventually they're going to ban you if you continue if you just stay on that approved backup account. So in the meantime, obviously, while their spa number, business EIN number stuff in the campaign gets approved, I'm using them on a backup account. And that way, if they want to stay after the trial, I finally get that, that I would go through a few like iterations and I finally get them approved under their business name. And then I can just migrate everything to their spa account, if that makes sense. So, but here's the thing. Even to get approved under their spa account, I had to go through tons of iterations. It's super annoying. It's a very time-consuming process. But eventually, with enough testing and different things, I sat down and I really I put a lot of time and effort into really just codifying exactly what gets approved. So, and I even bought a new domain and I did everything. So I got this new domain and you might be wondering why the hell I got a new domain and where I'm going with this. But basically, so like I said, you need that live link, right? That live link where these A2P people, these reviewers can go and check that your live website matches, the spa name, everything like that, all this bullshit, and everything is compliant. So I got a super generic domain name. I called it intakeservices.com or some shit, super generic. And then what I did is I made it so that I made a generic template that I can just change the spa name in, like all the details to match that spa. It only takes 10 seconds now. I can just change, the details to match the spa that I'm trying to get approved for. And I can just copy paste the previously approved, verbiage and what do you call it? Like the compliant wordings. And I can copy paste that onto a new approval and then get consistently approved. So, obviously, it's not 100% going to work all the time, and the reason is because A2P is super variant. And what I mean by that is, I've sent in literally I've gotten approved for this account on my business account, my personal Adaro business account. I got approved for using this set of information once. I literally the next day copy and paste that same exact word for word information onto another of my own EIN number business account. So the same EIN business information number campaign, everything is exactly the same. I copy paste it, I send it out, and I get denied. Because the reason is because the people who are reviewing it, they're different reviewers every time. So some are more strict than others, and some of them just deny for no reason. It's just this whole bullshit thing that is going on behind the screens. So what is the solution? The solution is I have a template type of website now that I can kind of iterate a bit, and I kind of have everything is pretty template now that I can kind of copy paste, and obviously even if it gets denied, I can change a couple verbs and then send it the verbiage a bit and then send it back again. But what I'm doing is I'm gonna every week send in a new one of my own personal business EIN account numbers. Get a bunch of approved backup accounts, ideally 5, 6, 7, 8. So at any given point in time, if I want, if I have a trial that I want to set up, I can set it up directly onto one of these backup accounts while I get approved for their their personal spa account. And then once they choose to to stay after the trial, then I can just migrate their account into their approved account and make this backup again. I know this is like super complicated and probably like super confusing. Basically, it took a lot of effort. This is one of those, compliance is one of those bullshit things. This is like so bullshit. But anyway, yeah. As you can probably tell, I really don't like this A2P compliance thing. It's just like there's so hyper scrutinization over the shit that you. It's like I don't know. I could go on and on about this shit, but whatever. All right. So the next ginormous thing that I fixed, and this is a huge one, is so once that remember if you watched the last video, I said that once I have two paying spas officially concurrently paying, that I would prepare to hire a VA. And so like I did get two concurrently paying spas at one point. So I was like literally preparing to hire a VA because that lady paid $750 before I refunded her, obviously. But so during this whole process of me preparing to hire a VA, I standardized a whole bunch of shit. I made shit very simple, very easy. I deleted a whole bunch of shit. And I created this entire, very simple, very easy to understand SOP. I'm probably not going to show it because, there are many reasons. But basically, I'll explain what it was. A very nice, well, I still have it, obviously. I'm going to use it forever. But this SOP it's a very simple how-to instructions with videos on every single directions of how to do a system. So like an un-tech savvy or non, super, what do you call it? Like GHL or whatever you want to call it, non-super like tech savvy person with this system could understand it. It's very simple instructions, very simple how to, like I said, it's like how to tag with the video link, how to do this video link, how to do this video link, what to do this video link. Basically all the how-to instructions. I went through everything meticulously, and I went through and I mapped out how to do everything. So it's very easy for anybody with videos, like I said. So it's very easy for anybody to do it. And then when I go to hire somebody, I'll just go with them, I'll watch the videos with them, and then teach them how to do it and make sure that there's no questions. I'll go through everything, make sure they understand, adjust anything on my, adjust anything that's confusing on my SOP sheet, and then have them, onboarded and shit like that. This is so that I prevent a bunch of bullshit, which is like, if you don't have a centralized template of how to do things, the problem is then, they're going to have no idea what the hell to do. You're going to show them once, they're going to forget, and then it's fucked up. So what I want is that, they ideally, before asking me any questions, first go to the sheet and see if there's an answer right there. And if there isn't an answer, then tell me, then I can update the sheet so that there's always an answer there, right? So it's like, I don't want there to be I don't want to have to be basically micromanaging every single fucking one of their actions. The ideal goal is that when I hire this person, after a month or two, I should be able to only talk to them once a week, and I should know that they're getting everything done, and I should be able to see that everything is getting done exactly how I would be doing it. You know what I'm saying? And basically, I'm trying to make everything so simple that anybody can do it. Even a fucking first grader should be able to do the job. And that's basically how simple I think. I haven't hired the person yet, obviously, because after I refunded that person, I basically put a pause on hiring for now. But everything was ready. I was literally about to hire this person. Everything was ready. I was about to call this person to the other virtual assistant from the other spa to kind of just ask her some questions, see if the job role could work for her. Because I was all 100% prepared on my side, but the person refunded, so I had to put a pause on that for now. But anyway, yeah. So I created that super general how to do everything, and then I also created a spa specific SOP. So every spa is gonna have their own specific. This actually doesn't take that long. It sounds like it takes a long time, but the spa specific one is actually very simple. I just go through. I film a video real quick, a 5-minute video of how to actually schedule on that spa. I list down any specific rules that spa has, they don't want to be scheduled, within 24 hours, or they have a deposit, or some whatever simple bullshit rules that's. Sorry, not bullshit, but whatever simple exclusions or rules that spa has, I'll list that on a sheet. Any specific instructions, list that on that sheet. That's the spa-specific instructions. That way, it's separate from the general instructions, because obviously not every single spa is going to have the same scheduling system, not every single spa is going to have the same rules, all that stuff. But yeah, so that's basically, I went and I did all that, and this happened over the course of 3-4 days. I sat down and I pretty much stopped all cold texting so that I could do that. And it was definitely great. One other thing I did was I standardized the times. Before this, I would call between 8 and 6 p.m. Now, after realizing that that's like physically it's like impossible for me to like offload that correctly. And then I would message whenever I was awake, which is pretty stupid if you think about it. Like, how am I ever gonna tell? This doesn't make any sense. So I basically standardized the hours. Now we only make calls between 9 and 5 p.m. We do messages until 7 p.m. and the messages are only generic. We don't book people after 5 p.m. Any bookings will have to wait until the next day. That's very simple, very easy to understand. And if a spa has problems, we'll get another spa. I'm not gonna deal with those. We're only gonna do something that's simple. I want it to be able to, I don't want anything to be super custom, because if anything is super custom, then I can't teach it correctly to another person. It's gonna end up causing too many problems. So it's better just to not even have that spa. I'd rather not take your money. If it's not gonna fall into our way we do things, then goodbye. That's it. Not in a very respectful way. Like, hey, it's not gonna work for us. So yeah. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, during this time, I did all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I fixed this like auto billing message, so I don't have to manually send billing messages. That's kind of not that relevant here. But yeah, and then I also during the same time I was working on moving. Because my dad basically got a new job in San Diego. I was living in the LA area. Now I'm living in the San Diego area. But yeah, I had to move during this is like about a week or two ago. Oh yeah, this is another major thing I fixed. So, well, one, obviously, not only did I standardize everything, but also I wanted to make it so easy for the person to do reach outs. Another thing that I did was like, okay, so what exactly do the caller need to have when they're about to make calls? Well, they need to obviously have the tabs open, right? So Google has this cool thing, it's called tab groups, and tab groups save to the system, like the browser that you're using. So I guess the best way to explain this is when a caller goes on, all they have to have is one login, right, to that spa account that I made for that spa. They can just click on the tab group, and then all of the tabs related to that follow-up, like their website, their scheduling system, that respective GHL system, that template response, the spa-specific internal sheet, all of that automatically opens up, and so it's ready for them to, within a second, they're ready to make calls immediately like that. And that way, if they want to, they can have like 5 or 6 multiple different accounts. They're all separated by their separate tab groups, if that makes sense. And they're not on the same profile. They're like different Chrome profiles, if that makes sense. That might have been too confusing right there. But basically, it's very easy for a caller to make calls and have simultaneous accounts because of the way I did it. And I also simplified a lot of things. So, yeah. And the passwords. I made the passwords in a way. Yeah, this is kind of confusing too, but basically it's simple. Everything's simple so that any caller can do it. I can get into the details, but I think a lot of it will be confusing because it's like super detailed and it just won't be relevant to like anybody. So yeah. Okay, this is like actually one of the biggest things I fixed. And this surprisingly only took a day to fix. Like it's like some of these things you'd think take forever to fix. But like to get exactly what you're looking for, it's actually not that much time and effort. So the report, I'll actually probably link a video here about the before and after for the daily reporting about like what it looks like before, or what it looks like now. But one of the things that I really, really hated was the daily reporting, because I would send daily reports and that's great. But the problem is I could only send, like, the daily reports is a little bit odd because it's like, okay, there's a lot of confusion with the daily reports because it's like, because here's the main thing that kept coming up with the daily reports. And I'll explain the confusion, and then when you hear it, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is pretty confusing, and it's hard to get right. And I'm going to explain it now. And the confusing thing was basically that when you go to read a daily report, you expect to see what? You expect to see how many leads came in that day, how many leads were booked, how many leads reported not interested, all of that information. Okay, that's great. And that's really easy to do for new leads, right? So like, let's just say you had like 10 new Botox leads. That's great. You had 10 new Botox leads, 3 booked that day. 3 said not interested, 1 booked that day. That's fantastic. Good to know. But now here's where the confusion comes in. Okay. Those 10 Botox leads come in today. Okay. Now, 2 days later, another one says not interested. And 3 days later, another one books. So if I'm sending a daily report with only the new leads, the problem is, what happened to that booked lead? It just doesn't get reported. Like, okay, I booked it on, let's just say that lead came in on Monday. I only reported that it came in on Monday, but it booked on a Friday. So on Friday, what do I report? Do I report like a new lead that came in that I booked, no, I can't report that. You see what I'm saying? You see where the confusion comes in? Because I'm sending a daily report of what happened today, and they book another day because our follow up system is over multiple days. Then how do you? Okay, but what I was used to do is I separated into two categories. Okay, I have new leads that came in today, right? And then you have previous leads, and anything previous that ended up booking or anything like that would fall into this category. But the problem with doing that is that it's very confusing. It's like, okay, this previous lead could be from 3 days ago, it could be from 25 days ago, and that lead responded and I booked them. It's very confusing, it's very annoying, it doesn't make much sense. And also with this, it's manual. So the way I was doing the reporting is I'd have a tag for the day one, and then I have a tag for day two, and then anything that booked after day two would basically anything. The second I booked after day two, like let's just say I booked on day five, it would get tagged with the day two tag, so it get reported. It get back into it made it very confusing. It was hard to report, and the solution to this was sitting down, and realizing. See, some of this stuff I can't believe I didn't realize earlier, but GHL has a reporting dashboard already. It's, to be honest with you, it's like it's really unintuitive. It's probably the most unpolished thing in GHL is the reporting section, because literally me when I went through to do this reporting thing, I literally had to actively fight the system to get what I wanted. The UI is super wonky. It's like I'm dealing with it's like the first generation Android phone or something when I'm working with this UI. It's unbelievable, but I got what I wanted in the end. But yeah, it's definitely the most unrefined version. It's like the most unrefined part I've seen of GHL is the reporting and dashboard section. It's unbelievable how like weird and like the glitches that just keep happening. It's super weird, but once you get it right, yeah, at least it's like an automatic. It's not too bad. But anyway, I'll also obviously, like I said, there should have been a video linking the before. I'll put it in here, the before and after. But basically, what I did was I deleted this whole bunch of shit, like the previous. I'll go over it in the video. Everything I basically deleted, but I made it very simple. I made it easy to understand, and basically it's just so much easier now because not only is it simpler and easier to understand, but also on top of that, it's automated. So I don't have to sit down, copy and paste the daily. What do you call it? The metrics, because what I'd be doing is every single day, at the end of the day, like around 5 or 6 o'clock, I'd go through, just like through the filters. I'd have like basically saved search filters, and then I'd search, how many, Botox leads came in today. Okay, 3 came in today. 1 said not interested. 1 said, one said, wrong number, whatever it is. And then I'd have to enter that into a sheet, like manually, into a Google Doc, and then I copy paste from a Google Doc into an email, and then I click send. And it's like, okay, that's like super, super shit. Also, the problem is, like, if you wanted to see, like, okay, what about from this date range to this date range, it's not really easily accessible. It's not flexible. Like, I can't show you, from Tuesday the 4th to Monday the 16th, this is the information. I can't tell you all that information because I'm sending it manually with a Google Doc. So, new system, so much better. I'll probably put the video in now.
All right, so this is going to basically be the video describing the metrics and, kind of like the before and after. So basically this is going to be the before. I'll just show you what it would look like on an email. So you basically, like an owner would get an email like this. This is like an example. And it would kind of contain, like each new category, like I was saying. And then this is just like the new leads for the day. So the new website leads would just be like, whatever website leads came in that day, what happened, blah, blah, blah. And then the previous ones would just be like, obviously, any lead. So this is like day 2. So the second day, whatever we're doing, because we do 2 calls, right? We do a call on the first day and the call on the second day. So the call on the second day would get recorded here. And then also anybody else that ends up booking or does anything will also get recorded as previous person. I get that. That's exactly the whole confusion. Like, okay, we want to have the reporting for and like attribution for like if somebody does book at a later date, because that's the whole point of the follow-up service. Like, hey, we're because we're following up over multiple days, people are still booking, but it also makes everything a lot more confusing when you're talking about a daily report. So yeah, basically this is literally how it would look. I get it's also probably not that like visually appealing. Kind of just have like a bulleted list of this lead source, this lead source and what the response was, and then this lead source and then what the response is, and then this lead source. You know what I'm saying? And that's basically the entirety of the the metrics. And I'd literally, what I would have to do is I'd have to literally go in every single day. I'd have these like saved filters, so it'd literally just be like tag is this, and I'd have to like look at the number of the contacts each day. Who was it like had a not interested tag? Did they have this tag? Whatever. And then I just go to the next category of leads, whatever it was, click on it, and then check out the next category of leads. And then I'd have to do that, and then I'd literally just copy paste onto like this sheet, and then I'd paste it onto here. And then also I already started doing some deletion like over the last few weeks on like just other categories, because it's just like there's so many. This is like the original one. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 categories or something for each one, and that already gets really kind of like confusing for an owner to read and for me to like sit down and do it every single time. So instead of doing all that, I already started deleting it. So as you can see, I got rid of the like a couple of the categories here that weren't required. And then now this is the new one, and this is just like the most simplified version. So this is like slightly more, at least I think it's cleaner to read. It's just this is the total bookings today. And then this is like obviously for this example day it'd be 2 bookings, and then where did those bookings come from, right? It came this day, it came from website leads, but let's just say they got 3 bookings that day, and then one of them came from here, one of them came from here. It would show that, and this just has from old and new leads, because the only thing that I realized that anybody would care about from the previous days is not if somebody said not interested on the 5th day. They would care about if that person booked, right? So all that really matters is the total bookings as a whole from that for that day. So basically on that day, whoever booked will get reported here, no matter when they booked. Even if they're like somebody that I stopped following up with, and then 30 days later they come back and then they reach out to us and then we book them, it'll still get reported as bookings on that day, right here. And then also now it's much cleaner. So this is this like new leads received by source, and then as you can see, I basically deleted. Now there's only 3 categories. There's, there obviously like how many leads that you got that day, or there's 4 categories, but like 3 result categories, and then how many leads you got that day. Is any of them not interested? Any of them wrong number? And did any of them book? That's very simple, very straightforward. It's also color coded, so it's not easy to mess up, and it looks way better than this bulleted list that's exceptionally confusing. And then and then if they wanted to see like long term, like let's just say like over the course of multiple months, they could just look at like date range like through this. Then they could say, okay, how many leads did I get in January? And then they can click confirm, and that they all they have to do is just go to their dashboard, and then they can see, oh wow, we got this many leads, this many bookings. This is our best lead source. This is the next best lead source. This is the worst lead source, etc. or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And they can do that for like each week or whatever. But as you can see, like if somebody wanted to do that here, if somebody asked me like, okay, last month what was the best performing lead source, I basically have no answer for them. Not that anybody did ask, but if somebody did ask, I'd have to like maybe go through like this list and then ask ChatGPT to compile it for me or something to see what was the best. But that was so simple. They could go by whatever date range. Okay, over this day and this day, what happened? Oh, okay, this is what happened. That's you see what I'm saying? So it's much simpler, much cleaner, and it only took me a few hours to fix. So this is like it took me like maybe like 4 or 5 hours. So it's definitely a worth it type of upgrade that is definitely making everything significantly more cleaner.
As far as like fixes go, it was a big fix, but like not. It only took a day to actually fix it and do all that shit. But yeah, that was definitely one of the major nice things that I finally did, and that was recently. So yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah, aside from that, I did look into some other things. I did a lot of cold texts, and then after I fixed that, basically that you're coming to today, there was like 4 or 5 full days where it was just moving. Basically, it was just me moving from there to here. Moving is super annoying, and it takes a long time. But yeah, there's a good 4 or 5 days until like a couple days ago that we're just moving. I'm kind of back to the DMs now, or not the DMs, fuck, the cold texting. So I'm back to the cold text now. I'm doing I increased it, like I said, from about 1,000. I used to be sending 1,000 a day. Now I'm sending roughly, yesterday I sent about 2,000. I'm going to be continually sending 2,000 to 3,000 cold texts per day because, like I said, I improved my system so that volume is handleable now. And you might be wondering, okay, well, didn't you only have like 60,000 leads? Yeah, so here's the thing. Yesterday, I realized, okay, well, MedSpas are great and they're super great. But this, honestly, if I'm standardizing replies this much, it could literally apply to quite a few different types of businesses that are still in the same like medical niche, like chiropractors or like cosmetic surgery or like hormone therapy or whatever, or like the IV drip. These are very similar industries, tattoo removal. These are very similar industries, so I don't have to stick just to med spas. But I have 6 queries now. So basically, I had 6 queries that were pretty much med spa related that I tested, and I got the 60,000 leads from the entire U.S. And now, or whatever it was, 55,000, 60,000, something like that, 55,000 or 60,000 leads that are all like deduplicated. So 60,000 textable leads that I got from the med spa searches. So now that I'm able to create new accounts, because Google basically, I don't know, it was like a temporary block or something that they did. I'm able to create more new accounts for the free trials. So I'm just gonna keep doing that. And basically, I'm just gonna do that. I have 6 new queries. One is like cosmetic surgery. The other one's like hair restoration, chiropractor. I think it was hormone therapy was one of them. I think IV drip, and I can't remember the last one. But there's like 5 or 6 new ones that are not related to med spas, but are still like in the medical kind of like related type things. But also would be needing similar like consultation based. They're for consultation first, and then type by type of businesses, and basically I'll have another 60,000 leads very soon to contact, and that'll 60,000 2,000 a day, 60,000. Yeah, I mean I should get trials from that. So, and I can always do more. There's still tons of businesses. I can just keep running more and more cold text. There's like hundreds of thousands adjacent businesses that I can keep kind of going slightly adjacent, figuring it out. And I can also go back through text all the people who are interested. I can go back through text. There's so many things I can do. So lead generation is good for the next at least a few months. Aside from that, that's basically we got all the way from the last video to now. We're pretty much all caught up. I can't remember anything else that's going on really, other than that. Continuing to send the cold text. Looking to get that next trial. Oh yeah, another big thing is I raised the price again, and the reason is because $750. I raised it to $995 for every 4 weeks. I'm gonna test it at that price now and see what happens. The reason is because if I feel like $750, like the last 2 people, one was just simply not a fit because they just wanted something that nobody could ever deliver, and the other one was not a fit because I think they simply couldn't afford it. But I feel like the second one would have been completely avoided if I just set a higher price, like $995. They wouldn't have even signed up for the trial, and that's actually a good thing in this case because as far as like how much more I'm going to learn from trials, yes, there's still obviously tons to learn and tons to iterate on. But right now, I kind of want to just focus on getting the next actually good client that's going to stay. And I think if you put it at a higher price point, people are going to self-select out, and only the clients, and only the leads that are actually really needing of the service and are like of a proper size and profitability are actually going to be able to be interested. So that's kind of the goal now. I can always reduce the price back to $750 if after like a couple weeks nobody's replying, but we'll see how it goes. I raised the price on that, and then not only did I standardize times, but I'm now going to make sure that we're not going to do reach outs on like certain holidays like New Year's Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, July 4th. I think that's it. But yeah, just those like holidays. And the reason is because, one, most spas aren't even operating on those days. 2, it doesn't really make sense to do reach outs on those days. It'd be hard to staff on those days. It doesn't really make much sense. And then 3, there's no operational benefit for me doing those days anyway, because people don't like being contacted on those days. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure to stop doing that. And aside from that, that's basically all the major improvements, all the major changes, and all the major things that happened in the last about a month or so. And I also turned, complete side note, I also turned 21 as of January 7th. So that's like what, two or 3 weeks ago now. So yeah, pretty cool. And yeah, let's get to the next topic. Okay, so next topic, and this is actually really interesting, and that is that I realized that lead follow-up is actually a far bigger problem than I had originally realized. So originally, when we were talking about lead follow-up of this like the whole lead follow-up system, we were talking about they're small to medium-sized businesses, and we are going to reduce their execution latency and all of that so that we can increase their revenue and basically create productivity. Right? The goal of the company is to increase the scope and scale, expand the scope and scale of productivity. Right? Obviously, I don't have the flyer up here, but that's probably next video I will. Anyway, so and the goal was to use that knowledge and that capital that you gain from solving this small to medium-sized business problem to pick a new problem and then expand the total productivity in that new problem so that you can then expand the total created productivity and then understand the nature of the universe. Anyway, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So I realized something. And that is, So I was analyzing just for fun. Like, okay, well, that's great. Lead follow-up is cool. I wonder what the next, what else is a huge problem that is like, requiring a large, scale problem solving. And I realized that actually lead follow-up is actually a far bigger problem than I realized. And here's what it is. If you look across almost any industry, okay, almost any government, almost any system, and any place, I guess any large group of people that are communicating, there's a lot of low judgment communication, right? It is like here, I have some notes here that I'm just gonna go off of. Right here. There's a lot of latency in low judgment communication. What do I mean by that? Well, what am I doing right now in lead follow-up? Well, what I'm doing is strictly this. A lead is reaching out, right? And they, are looking to schedule a deal, or they're interested in a certain service, and we are reaching out just scheduling that service. Or why can't the business do that themselves? Well, the business, they have to deal with existing clients, right? They have to deal with other shit that's going on in their life. The business is also, working on billing, accounting, insurance, all this other shit. So the new leads are not the highest priority compared to all the other stuff that they're working on. So new leads end up not getting followed up with consistently, not getting booked consistently, and there's a lot of latency and basically a lot of drop off and whatever you want to call packet loss or whatever you want to call that in the new lead section. Okay, but if you actually look a little bit bigger, this is not limited to just small to medium sized businesses. If you look at it, there's a lot of low judgment communication. Because what is this fundamentally? It's low judgment communication. It's not expertise level communication. It is simply, scheduling somebody into a simple thing, booking somebody into something, sending standardized replies like, okay, the deal is this copy paste reply. It's a $1.99 for this, or whatever. These are copy paste replies, very simple, very easy, right? Anybody and their mother could be able to do it. It is low judgment, right? What does that mean? Well, that means fundamentally, if you actually look at it and you expand it slightly outside of just pure lead follow-up, this problem actually applies to far, far bigger things than simply small to medium-sized businesses. It actually applies to almost every government organization. It applies to almost every major corporation. They all are really bad at low judgment communication. Why is that? Well, let's just take governments for an example. Imagine going to the DMV or scheduling an appointment. If you ever deal with calling the government or calling a government organization and trying to schedule an appointment, it's always a fucking hell. Because why? Why? Because it's so low judgment that nobody really gives a shit about it, and it's just a pain in the ass because they have other shit that they're dealing with, and you're the last priority to this person. What does that end up causing? That causes a lot of wasted time, a lot of confusion. It causes a lot of pain and unnecessary suffering that occurs in the market when it comes to all these things. Right, okay, so why am I even referencing this? Well, low judgment communication, if you solve low judgment communication at scale, repeatedly, you could literally take that and apply that to, like I said, government organizations, right? You can apply that to large scale businesses, tons of, I'll give you an example, right? Waste management, right? Waste management, it sounds great on paper, they take your waste, all that shit. But if you ever tried reaching out to waste management and trying to get something scheduled, like a pickup service or bulky items or some shit, they're always hard to reach. Sometimes they don't answer the call properly. Sometimes they say they're gonna get back to you but never do. It's a fucking pain in the ass to deal with that company, even though it's a fucking giant billion-dollar corporation. Okay, why is that? Well, the reason is because, like I said, it's low judgment communication, and because it's low judgment, a lot of these companies don't value it very high, and it just ends up getting dropped off. And a lot of businesses, companies, all this shit suffer from this exact same problem. Okay, so now this came to the realization that the TAM, or the total addressable market, of this lead follow-up thing is really, if you zoom out a little bit, it's actually quite big. It's actually it might be a multi-billion-dollar, $100 billion type thing if you actually think about it. Because if you standardize low judgment communication apply. What are you reducing? You are reducing the latency in low judgment communication. That literally applies to almost every industry universally. Almost, you could even imagine there's so much low judgment communication that happens between businesses, one vendor to another vendor. You're just doing very simple shit. Governments, just so many different industries that have a lot of low judgment communication between customer and business, or between business and business, or whatever, that if there's an intermediate third party, it not only increases revenue, but it also increases, goodwill towards the company, brand perception. It increases a lot of good things. If waste management, let's just say, for example, is on the ball, they're calling you, they're following up, they're getting your things scheduled like that, boom, 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 fast, fast, fast. Everything's good. You're going to respect the company a lot more. You're going to be way more likely to call them again for your services. It's just overall, everything gets better. For a government, let's just say you're a politician, you sign in this new service at our solutions. They come in and they follow up, like all the people who are calling for government services. They now get answered immediately. They get booked directly into whatever they need to get booked for, whether it's like a new license or whatever bullshit or whatever it is, their new service, whatever it is. They are getting booked immediately. They're getting handled. They're fast. Everything is nice. They're responsive. When that happens, the voter base is obviously going to be happier and more satisfied with the government, even though fundamentally nothing has actually changed about the government other than the response time and the communication latency has been reduced, right? And if you think about it from a politician's perspective, obviously they'd be incentivized to implement that if it actually does benefit the voter base. But anyway, that's besides the point. But the point is this is the problem of communication, like low judgment communication latency. Reducing communication latency over in low judgment situations, not high judgment. Because high judgment, what is high judgment? High judgment is like a fucking doctor or something. You don't want to reduce the communication latency like for a doctor because that's very specialized, treatment care. You need very specialized, like knowledge for that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is low judgment communication, like very, very basic scheduling, low stakes, where like if there's a mistake that happens, it's just like a scheduling mistake. Who cares? It's not a big deal. Stuff like that. Low judgment communication is standardized. It's replicable, and it's something that applies to literally like you name it. It's basically like a $1 trillion problem because. The thing is, with low judgment with communication latency and low judgment systems, is that responsibility is not like it's hard to pin responsibility on any one party. It's just not like I said, a major focus. It is a revenue driver if you have high fast response times, but it's not enough to where you need like it's not enough to where it's profitable to have an entire department for it. But if somebody does solve the problem like a third party, it's super duper. There's a high return on investment there. But anyway. So, what is the realization? Realization is this problem, if solved right, you don't actually need to solve other problems to expand productivity at scale. If you solve low judgment communication latency at scale, it's actually one of the biggest problems. It's actually one of the biggest problems that humanity actually has is low judgment communication latency. Is high amounts of latency in communication in low judgment systems, right? That's a huge problem. If that makes sense. So yeah, let's go to the next thing. Yeah, now that we've established that I don't really need to switch problem sets. If I just actually hyper-analyze on this one problem set, it can get as big as I want it to be. In fact, it can be like a $1 trillion type situation if you actually do it correctly and you actually solve low judgment communication at scale. That's basically the insight. Anyway, aside from that, the next thing I want to talk about is how basically understanding is structurally guaranteed. What do I mean by that? So, ever since Neanderthals have existed, basically, ever since a bit of iteration, basically, technically speaking, actually, you could probably take this back to even bacterial replication, but ever since genetic iteration has occurred, basically like evolution, like basically where something iterates, and changes in order to improve towards a metric, which I guess over evolution is the metric is survivability and gene spreading. Essentially, since that process has occurred, understand everything that could be understood is now structurally guaranteed to be understood at some point. If that makes sense. Why do I say that? Well, basically humanity is on an iteration loop. Okay, if you zoom out, iteration will continue and continue and continue, and obviously it'll get more scale over time. And eventually, everything that is possible to be understood in the universe will eventually be understood. It is guaranteed at this point. The second you had iteration, through evolution, and basically self iterating, like you do something towards an objective, you make a mistake, and then you fix that mistake, and then you get closer to that objective. Ever since that has existed on a long enough time horizon, it is guaranteed now to have. It is now guaranteed to eventually have understanding of every single thing that could be understood will be understood. And the reason for that is because the reason that is also guaranteed is because humanity is so robust that no humans could actually permanently end all humanity, and there's no natural disaster that could occur in the near future for at least a few 100 million years that would wipe out all of intelligence. And people always bring up like the nuclear war example, but even nuclear war wouldn't wipe out all intelligence. It would definitely set thousands of years back. But we talk about like universal timescales of like hundreds of millions of years. Honestly, it's just like that would be like not even a speck of time. So like I said, if you zoom out, essentially understanding is structurally guaranteed. Because like if you think about how like all of modern humanity is essentially the last like couple 100,000 years, and really almost all iteration happened the last 200 and 300 years. Before 300 years ago, if you go back to like maybe about like 1700, before 1700, basically for like between like year 500 and year 1500, you really didn't see much of a difference. I mean, there were differences obviously, but like actually like like real technological innovation. Basically, the last 300 years is like the real technological innovation that has actually happened in iteration. Most of that is actually not necessarily due to iteration not being possible. It's more due to the fact that society, they restrict rigid social structures. I mean, this is a whole nother talk, I guess. But it's like the whole reason that society was unable to iterate was because like essentially the system of society back in the day was against iteration, right? There was very strict, rigid structures. It didn't matter even if you were the emperor and wanted to iterate, because if you tried to iterate, then everyone would shun you and you wouldn't be the emperor anymore. And if you were like a peasant trying to iterate, then people would basically like outcast you. So there was throughout history until very recently, because what ended up happening in the modern world is that once a society starts iterating, then every society is forced to do the same, otherwise they get outcompeted. Once that happens, now iteration is structurally guaranteed. But anyway, that's besides the point. It was always structurally guaranteed if you go back far enough. If you think about it, because on a long enough time horizon, iteration will eventually happen, and therefore everything will have to. I think I'm getting too confusing here. Anyway, so yeah. And now, since it's structurally guaranteed, all now there's only semantical questions of who will understand that is left, if that makes sense. So like now that's all that's left is like, okay, now that we already wrote down that it's guaranteed to happen, that eventually everything that could be understood will be understood. Now the only questions left are who will understand and how fast will it happen, kind of yeah, okay, I'm getting confusing here. But anyway, that's basically the point. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, which is actually very, very interesting, is that if you really look at it, scale really isn't luck. And what I mean by that is like scale like Amazon or scale like Tesla or like scale like Google or like scale like Toyota or all these large companies. It's really not luck at all, like in any meaningful way. Like actually luck honestly contributes almost zero to the factor. It's just constant repeated, like it's just a constant repeated pattern of identifying the constraint, solving the constraint, and then getting to the next level and then solving the next constraint. And if you really look at it and analyze it, most companies don't get to Amazon not because they physically couldn't. Most companies don't get to Amazon because they're just not identifying the core constraint. And they're not working on solving it. They got scale. Like for example, even most tech companies or like most online businesses, they end up solving the problem that they're solving. Like I don't know, let's just say like like Grubhub or something. They end up solving delivery, like making a delivery app, but they're not really able to scale past that delivery app because they're not really working on anything other than optimizing the delivery app. Like how do you expect? It's like how do you expect to build a mansion if you're just sitting down still optimizing the tiny little cottage that you're building? It's never going to happen. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, like, scale is just a factor of identifying the core constraint, devoting resources towards iterating, towards solving that core constraint, and then growing it, and then expanding the total like addressable market that you're working with. Obviously, it's easier said than done. It's not exactly like like every company can just go ahead and start spending billions of dollars on the next big problem. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, scale fundamentally isn't like some it's not like some magic ball like poof you get a slide, you get some lady comes down with a magic wand and then poof you got scale. It's like it's how it works. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's just taking effort, applying it to the correct constraint on and on and on. Like Amazon, let's just take Amazon for an example. They started by selling books. They started realizing, okay, there's logistical problems with, okay, how do you logistically make this efficient? It's just like solving one step at a time. It's just each core problem. What is the constraint of the business? What is stopping us from growing more? Let's solve that constraint. Okay, what is the next constraint of growing more? Let's solve that constraint. And then just very slowly, over years and decades. It's very boring and it's very analytical. It's just, it's just and then eventually you get scale, right? Because you just solved enough problems to where it's such a robust system that eventually you get scale. But a lot of the problem is that, once you get used to one thing, then you kind of end up like just optimizing and just staying. Because the problem with getting to scale is that you have to break norms and the things that you've done in the past, and it's easy to do when you're by yourself. Like for me, it's easier for me to just okay, change this, change that. Okay, let's do this, let's do that. Let's iterate on this, let's iterate on that. But when you're talking about like a company, there's like entire teams of people that are just like working on this, and then you have to you have to basically like completely delete this. You have to remove a bunch of people. You have to do this. You have to like reconstruct or reconfigure. You have to get rid of old things. You have to do new things. You have to like maybe sometimes completely delete stuff. Be unprofitable for a seriously long period of time. If people are losing, people like who may have had like shares in the company are now getting devalued because maybe the stock price has collapsed. There's like so many things that are like going on here that it structurally doesn't incentivize you to always identify the core constraint and then break it. Sometimes it's optimizing for kind of just like sometimes it's incentivizing just optimization instead of actually like core constraint changing. Instead of if we're like Grubhub, instead of trying to solve the next big problem, let's sit down and let's try to make it our service more profitable. How can we make sure that deliveries are continually going up? What can we do to make people use our system over any other system? What can we do to make sure each delivery is more profitable for us? Stuff like that. That's optimization over let's solve the next big problem after delivering food. Let's solve something like completely like a larger problem. You see what I'm saying? Also, another thing is like, especially for a lot of these companies that get to scale, including Amazon, basically they have to structurally stay unprofitable for a really long time on purpose. But the thing is it's not actually unprofitable. It's just on the unit level. Like let's just say, for example, like with Amazon, right? On the unit level per warehouse, they were structurally profitable per warehouse. Like every single warehouse that they were building was profitable. They were just using the excess profit to invest in another warehouse. So like on paper, yeah, the business itself lost money that year. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But every single warehouse that they're building is profitable in the sense that every single warehouse brings money in excess of anything it spends. So that is by definition profitable. It's just on paper when you actually factor in investments, yes, obviously what they invested in is going to be is taking obviously from their profit. But you have to do that when you do that for decades and decades. Most companies aren't willing to do that because your stock price won't go up unless you get profit. It's that's just a basic thing that's going on here. And then also another thing is, like I said, executives a lot of times are not incentivized to do that. A lot of them kind of just want a payday and stuff like that. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point. Core principle. What I'm trying to get at is this. Scale isn't luck. It's just systematic. It's achievable by anybody and anything, including me and anybody. It's going to happen. You'll see. But scale is simply identifying the core constraint. Okay? Whatever the core constraint of the business is. Iterating and basically solving every core problem towards that core constraint. And then finding the new core constraint, optimizing for that. It'll take 20 to 30 years. Obviously, you're not going to get scale immediately or overnight. That's not how it works. Obviously, scale takes time. But at the end of the day, it's not some like magic fairy, like I said, that comes down, waves a wand, and boom, you get scale. It's systematic solving with every single core constraint until you accomplish the objective. So, yeah. And I'm telling you, I'm going to be an example of this. You'll see. Somebody's going to watch this video in 20 years and be like, damn, he was right. It is just identifying the core constraint. It's a fucking science, bro. I'm telling you, it's a science. It's just like back in the day, like back in the day, like 300, 400, 500 years ago, when a cannon fired, people would say, oh, wow, look at that cannon. It fired. The gods must have blessed that cannon. Now you know that if you just construct the cannon correctly, it'll fire the same way every single time. It's not like the gods favored this one, the gods didn't favor that one. But it's more like if you just construct it and you solve the correct problems, you will get the solution that you're looking for. It's the same thing applied to this. It's just, yeah. Anyway, next thing. Simple scales, fancy fails. So, that saying is literally so applicable to everything in life. And, I don't know why I said that, but Alex Hormozi is the one who made that. And it's so true because, like, everything in life gets so much better when you just simplify it. I noticed that at least firsthand when I'm dealing with these system problems. It's like, okay, I had this problem. This is like this glitch or whatever, and I'm trying to fix it. And I'm like, and then I go back and I'm like, okay, wait, hold on. Why do we even have this feature? Like, let's just say, like, I don't know, a random one is like specific treatment handoff or whatever, where I like send it out like message, I tag it, I have a separate bracket, and then a separate reporting thing that says, oh, specific treatment question, follow up or whatever. And it's like, and I'm having glitches, and it's not working correctly. I'm like, wait, hold on. Why the hell am I even doing this in the first place? Like, it's like this one-off thing that I did one time. I made it into the protocol. It's like, wait, hold on. Just like, why? And it's like so many of these things. There's another one that's like wants to circle back. Like I created that extra like reporting thing, and then it's like whenever I do a custom follow-up for tasks, I have to add that. It's just like, wait, hold on. Why? It's like so many things in life should just be deleted. But anyway, the female question part 4. So I realized the solution that because I kept thinking in truncated ways in the sense that like, okay, based on at first I was thinking in my perspective, like right now, oh well, if you go to the female question part 1, it was just like me commenting about the fact that I don't see like what is the productive value of having a mate, like, but in my perspective, obviously that is the case because there is no value because you're 21 years old. Obviously, there's not going to be any value because there's no ROI there. And then obviously the next, I forgot like how many parts we had to this question, but anyway, the next couple times it was like, okay, well, and maybe there's like if you have a long-term partner though, that'd be like Akhil is like a compounded partner, blah blah. But then I realized, okay, well, maybe that's not necessarily the case because there's a lot of overhead. There's a systematic overhead of having somebody that's that aligned with you, and that would also kind of detract from the goal. But then I kept realizing, okay, then I came to the realization that, well, what is the simple thing here? The simple thing is that there shouldn't be any rules here because this is a constantly changing problem that is based on the time that the time period of life that you're in. Okay, it is based on your specific needs. Okay, your specific understanding set. Your specific. This is just like a custom solution that there is no one size. You're asking for a solution to a problem that is constantly changing. It's not. The female question is a constantly changing one because the point you are in life is completely different. Between 10 and 20 and 30, what you need and what you want and what is most productive is completely different than 30 to 40, which is completely different than 40 to 50. We're talking about like a constantly changing problem. So to take one solution and try to apply it, which is what I was trying to do, is like, well, what is the solution to this problem that is universal? There is none. The solution is that it's a moving target. Okay, what works? The question should be actually, what is most productive for this period of time that I'm in? Well, let me just do that. If what is most productive is being alone, then that is what is most productive. That's good. You stay like that. If what is most productive is doing whatever the hell you're doing with like 100 different ladies, then that's what's most productive. Do what you want to do. You see what I'm saying? It's like, well, there are no rules here. It's like whatever is actually objectively, like look at the metrics. What is the most productive? Where are you most accomplishing? Whatever your objective is. That is the solution to the problem. I kept like trying to apply a universal problem to a ever-changing, universal solution to an ever-changing problem. That doesn't work. It's fundamentally illogical. So, yeah, but basically the point is that every single decision has overhead. No matter what, that's what Jeff Bezos said. Every single decision you make has overhead. Whether you choose to buy a car or buy an SUV, each decision you make has overhead. The SUV might have more gas. The SUV might be safer though. You see what I'm saying? There's positives and negatives. There's overhead for every single decision. Whether you choose to mate or not to mate, there's overhead for every single decision. Whether you choose to whatever you choose to do, whether it's a career choice, as a business choice. Every single decision you make, whether it's deletion, whether it's subtraction, whether it's addition, whether it's whatever you make, there's always overhead in that decision that you have to factor in. There's no perfect decision that has no overhead. There's no perfect decision that you can make that solves all your problems because it's an ever-changing, it's an ever-changing problem set. Every single problem has more problems that will occur. But anyway, the point is, the solution is that there is no set solution to the solution that I come up with is that there's no, for the female question, is that there is no set solution. It is just whatever is most productive for that season or that time period that you're in. That is the correct solution actually. And it is not necessarily universally consistent with all people because all people might, like every single person might have different things that make them productive and different variables that they have to deal with. So there's no universal solution to that problem. Anyway, another thing I understood, which is also closely related, is how businesses differ from relationships of any type, not just like a mating relationship, but just a relationship of any type. A relationship to be strong, right? If you think about what is a strong relationship compared to a non-strong relationship, right? In business, if you want to have something strong, it's very standard, not customizable. Let's just say the ideal business. The ideal business is you're delivering a service that is not super custom, because if it's super custom, you can't do it multiple times, right? It has to be standardized, right? It has to be deliverable at scale. Anybody can do it. and obviously it's cheap to make and easy to sell high. That's ideal business, right? I think what's his name? Warren Buffett. He said unique, unique, expensive, sticky air. That would be the best business. Unique, expensive, sticky air. Because if it's unique, which means like nobody can really copy it. It's expensive, so you can sell it at a high price. Sticky, people don't stop buying it. Air, it costs you nothing. That's the ideal business. Anyway, that's the exact opposite of the thing that you want in a relationship. Here's why. Because in a relationship of any type, like I said, even a close friendship or a brotherhood, you want something that's actually hyper customized, right? So that it's strong and there's a good strong bond. You want it to be, success is more about how much you trust the other person that you're like, whether it's a brother or like whatever, how much you trust this person and how much you can accomplish together. And it's not custom, it's not standardized in any way. If it was standardized, then it'd be like any relationship that you have like on the street, like so, oh hey, what's up, bro, what's up, that's it. That's a super standardized relationship. Anybody can say what's up, anybody can say hey, what's up, man, and that's it. You see what I'm saying? Those relationships aren't strong in any meaningful way. A strong relationship is the exact opposite of strong business in the sense that it's very hyper custom, which means it's very sticky, and it's not something that is standardized or easy to replicate in any meaningful way. It would be the same thing for a marriage. What is a strong marriage? A strong marriage is where both people are hyper customized towards each other to the point where it's not really easily, you cannot interchange that person for anybody else. Then that marriage automatically becomes very strong. Or whatever relationship, like I said, like whether that be a brotherhood or even a business partnership, that relationship becomes really strong when you share a ton of very specific things that you've gone through, very specific norms and ways of doing things that are hyper customized and not really easy to and rules of thumb, stuff like that, not really easy to just like standardize and then replace. Also, another corollary point is that given the choice between like ignorance and clarity, you always choose clarity every time, even if clarity might be given the choice between blissful ignorance and torturous clarity, you always choose clarity. And the reason is because evolution over history has favored the idea that new experiences are meaningful, or the idea of exploration in the non, like, I'll give you an example, right? What is traveling? Traveling is basically you go into a new place. You are triggering that experience vector where you are doing something new. In history, that meant that you're finding new land for your tribe or finding new food or something like that. In the modern day, it offers no productive value in any meaningful way, right? So the idea of new experiences it's asinine. It's asinine. It's just like you're doing things for the sake of doing them that actually don't really like produce anything. Obviously, you could argue that it is a form of a form of like stress relief or whatever thing you want to say, and that's arguably true. But at the end of the day, for the amount of things that you spend time doing, like new experiences, like doing all this bullshit, for the amount of that time, I guess you could make this into like an actual you could make this into an equation. What is the required amount to have the maximum productivity? Most people probably do far more than the required amount, and which actually ends up negatively affecting productivity. But anyway, that's getting too much into the details. Point is this: evolution favored new experiences, stuff like that. The reality is, what matters is clarity, understanding, and how you can actually basically keep things consistent and iterative over time. What matters is iteration over time. Not in random bullshit new experiences, but in things that are applicable to solving problems at scale and understanding. I probably combined like 12 different things, so what I just said has no coherence to anybody. But what I'm saying is the evolution, basically humans like the idea of new experiences, or humans like the idea and reward the idea of ignorance, when in reality that is the exact opposite of what you need to accomplish productivity. Because a new experience is essentially just like it's a wrapper for in the past it would be a wrapper for like gaining new resources and stuff like that. In the present day, it's a wrapper for wasting time essentially. Obviously, like I said, that doesn't mean vacations are a waste of time. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, specifically speaking, most new experiences what is the ROI on time off? Time off means that you reset your ability, like you're looking at things from a new perspective. You reset, maybe you're working, your ability to work hard for extended periods of time. All that stuff gets reset back to zero, so you're able to work harder, for longer periods of time after the vacation. You're able to look at things in a new perspective. That's great. Most of the time, when you do that too often, like a vacation too often, or like a new experience too often, it's just wasting time. there's like an ROI there. There's a return on investment there at some point that drops off. You know what I'm saying? It's like food, basically. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a certain amount of food that is good, and then the ROI drops off, and you become obese if you eat too much food. It's just like it's like that in everything. But what I'm saying is, evolution. Obviously, food is super obvious, but new experiences is not. And just like the idea of new and like, because if you look at it, a lot of things in the modern world are based on experience. Oh, I'm going to go to this new place. Oh, I'm going to go see this new thing over the weekend. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try this new food. I'm going to do this. But like 99% of it is all basically redundant. I'm not saying that new experiences are bad. I'm just saying that evolutionarily, like I said, you are programmed to pursue that, but it's all bullshit. It's like once you understand what it is, once you've understood that, okay, a city, what is a city? A city is just it's a new what do you call it? Amalgamation of buildings, maybe temples or whatever bullshit, and then people, and then some new food varieties. That's basically every city in the entire world. You change a few factors, and basically every city is exactly the freaking same. So if you really look at it, like, okay, what am I gaining from this? Past the stress relief bullshit. What are you actually gaining from this? Effectively nothing, productivity wise. So I'm just saying, this is a PSA. I might be going on a random tangent here, but I'm just saying this because I noticed it myself, and it's helpful for me to realign myself with productivity aligned things and compounding things, if that makes sense. All right, let's get to the next topic. So this is kind of one that I was thinking about for the last few videos. I just didn't bring it up because, well, it's totally unrelated to the business. It's also kind of random, kind of tangential, but it's kind of interesting. So that is the July crisis. You might be wondering, why are you bringing up the July crisis? Pre-World War I history. What? Okay, what? Exactly. So, listen. So, July crisis. So, I was looking at the July crisis, and I realized it's probably the biggest human mistake, or well, I guess, collection of humans making a mistake in all of history. The mess up in the July crisis caused, obviously, World War I. And obviously, World War I cascadingly caused. World War II is basically just an extension of what happened in World War I. So it caused both world wars. It caused basically all of Europe to be completely, demolished. Eventually, it caused tons of displacement, tons of lost productivity. Most of the modern systems in this day and age that are existing, like most of the modern geopolitical problems that are existing today, are actually basically legacy problems that occurred because of the mess up. In some way, are related to the mess up of the July crisis. And here's why. So, July crisis, to my understanding, I'm no fucking historian, but this is basically, essentially, what I understood. Essentially, July crisis, most of the governments prior to World War I and World War II were pretty stable. As far as like Russia, obviously they had a monarchy, the Tsar government. Major countries. Germany had, they were like, there was like the Kaiser, and then, they had like their shit going on, but it was pretty stable. Compared to World War II governments, it was much more stable. UK was pretty stable financially and all that shit. So yeah, it was pretty stable. Everything was stable. Obviously, this one, a lot of these countries were growing, and it was kind of like a cascading. Obviously, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he got assassinated. That caused like a cascading problem. The Balkans kind of got everyone else involved. Germany made a stupid decision by giving a blank check, all that shit. Then Russia mobilized, causing Germany to mobilize, and then the British didn't make a decision until after Germany invaded Belgium or whatever. And then obviously it cascaded into World War I, and then basically everyone could see after about like the first month of war that this was going to be the worst battle ever, because people were dying by like crazy levels, and as soon as you brought firearms, it's just like with I think it was like the Maxim gun or whatever. I can't remember. I think the machine gun got implemented a couple of years after World War I started, but I can't remember. But anyway, point is, people could tell after about like the first couple months that this was going to be a fucking bloodbath, and there was no real way. It was like watching a crashing train in slow motion and not being able to do anything about it, because at this point it was too late. And essentially, it caused mass death in World War I. Obviously, not only the soldiers, but just like so much displacement in terms of like all the cities that were affected, all of that, and then obviously the fact that in World War I, all of the the people in the military ranks were basically the most educated people, right? The officers in like the British. The British military at the time, or even the German military, or even the Russian military, were like the most educated people. They went to, they basically just squandered a bunch of talent, because the amount of men that died in World War, it's like millions. We're talking about millions of the most educated people, and basically the working class of the country. if you talk about France, how many Frenchmen lost their lives there? It was like most of the men in France were killed. But yeah, when you're talking about when you're actually talking about like the actual productivity losses of that, years of war, it's cascadingly had a bad effect, because at the time Europe was literally the epicenter of all science, medicine, tech, all of it. It was literally like the peak, of everything. After World War One, you're talking about mass displacement, obviously, and then Germany was like in basically ruins, and then obviously that sowed the seeds, and then obviously you had the Russian Tsarist government that was getting basically taken over by there was like a whole like internal like the entire Tsarist government was essentially removed, and there was a whole like internal civil war, and then the Soviets took over, and communism at the time. I mean, we can objectively say that the Soviet rule was objectively bad because millions of people died in Russia, and objectively it was not a very productive. I mean, people will argue with that, but it was not a very productive governmental system compared to other governmental systems, and essentially, effectively, it also sowed the seeds for obviously the Nazi Party to come in, start essentially force World War II to come in, and then mass death on the Eastern Front between Germany and obviously the USSR, and basically a cascading like crazy amount of suffering, issues, political problems, mass amounts of productivity loss. I mean, if you look at Germany before World War One, it was like it was like a scientific like powerhouse. Some of the greatest scientists came from Germany. Some of the greatest engineering came from Germany. It was a beautiful place. After World War II, basically ruins. I mean, at this point, if you look at the modern day Europe, I mean, it's a shell of what it used to be. In the sense that obviously, yeah, it's still a nice place, productive, all that. But compared to what it could have been, had World War One and World War II not happened, I mean, you'd be talking about like right now, America is the leading obviously country in GDP wise and productivity wise in the world. But if you think about it, it's really despite all of these. It's like if you think about it, like America was only really like able to do that because there was a mass exodus of talent from Europe to America during the wars. Because of Nazi persecution, because of many reasons. Nobody wanted to be. A lot of Soviets didn't want to be in the Soviet state because they weren't able to actually iterate correctly, so they moved to America. There's a lot of mass exodus that came talent-wise that came from Europe to America in 30s, 40s, and 50s, all that. So which contributed to America being the number one country. Also, the fact that most of Europe was in tatters. Like I mean, if you look at after World War One, basically the British and almost every other country was like not in a good financial position, and then World War II happened, and then none of the countries were in a good financial position. Like I mean, you could tell by it because of the fact that India became not a territory. We'll get into India in a minute, but whole cascading like the whole cascading amount of issues happened because of the July crisis, and it was really just structurally because the people at the time were not good leaders. At the time, they weren't very. I guess I mean the thing is. It's really hard to say like, okay, they weren't good leaders or this or that, because at the time they were doing the best they could, right? With the knowledge that they understood at the time, they're doing the best they could. So it's really hard to hate on them, but they definitely did make a great decision. But anyway, if you think about what could have been, you could have had like literally, if you think about it, America after World War II was basically the dominant country, and there was no, if you wanted to start like a major company, there was no real other option other than America. Like today, let's just say, for example, if you have a tech company like Google, where are you going to put your headquarters in? It's definitely not going to be anywhere in Europe. It's definitely not going to be the Middle East. It's definitely not going to be in Asia. You're not going to be in China. It's like, so what you're really like, you're left with only one country, and that's the U.S. So no matter how the taxes go, there's just only one place to get good talent and have a good place to start your company. That's the U.S. There's no way you're going to go to like the U.K. or France or anything like that. So yeah, but imagine if World War I and II never happened, you'd probably have multiple epicenters competing with each other, you'd have the U.S., you'd have France, you'd have Germany, you'd have U.K. You have multiple. Everyone would be competing for the best talent almost. Right now, there's only one option. So in a way, it's not incentivizing. The U.S. is not necessarily incentivized to create the highest producing country, or the highest the facilitating the highest level of environment. It does have a great environment for business, but it's not necessarily hyper competitive against other nations to produce the best environment for productivity and scale. Where it would have been if World War I and II had not happened, you could imagine that those talent centers would not have had a max exodus to the U.S. and each area would almost be competing, and you'd have different, a lot more innovation. You'd probably have imagine 4 or 5 times the level of innovation that we currently have today because you'd have multiple countries competing against each other. You wouldn't have all that productivity loss, years of war. Basically, like I said, the epicenter of technology was essentially truncated for multiple decades because of the wars. I mean, yes, they were iterating on war weaponry, but that does not necessarily translate to actual, like, you can't like, yes, they did iterate on war technology. Yes, that's true. But if they weren't in a war, they would have iterated on more important things that actually matter, like solving problems. Like they would have, like, on like space, like reusable rockets. We could have iterated on, tech, AI. Like there's so many things that you could have iterated on that is more like is higher leverage than building a better tank or building a better weapon that can kill more people. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, okay. I think we kind of like addressed the point, basically being that July crisis was the biggest like systematic error that has ever occurred in humanity. You could also argue like Genghis Khan and all of his work there also was probably pretty unproductive for humanity because of how many how much productivity was lost because of his actions. Obviously, really, it's just a systematic thing. It's like, okay, if you really take a look at it, it's just legacy systems combining with like modern day iteration, right? Like, what is World War One? It's just it's really just the leaders that didn't really fully understand what modern country level warfare actually would look like and how much effect that would have on a country. They didn't really realize that going into a war would basically be like, it'd be impossible to back out essentially, and also it would cost the entire country's sanctity, and every single person would be affected. It's not like the entire country is working as one whole unit of war instead of back in the day where it's like you'd have like, it'd be completely like medieval warfare compared to like modern day warfare is completely different. Like, what I'm saying, like everything from not only just weaponry but also like the amount of people, the amount of like talent, the amount of countries' resources that are being applied. It's just totally different. It's a completely different, thing that's going on. Which is why since World War II, you haven't really had any major like global wars. It's mainly because it doesn't matter even if you win the war, because ruling over rubble is meaningless, right? And it's not, you can't conquest a city or like an area and then kind of run it like how you could in medieval times. It's just not like that anymore. It's just GDP is far more important than warlike capability in the modern day. And I guess we can talk about like India and how its formation was not exactly the best, considering. So obviously, this is probably going to not be received very well. But the truth is, Gandhi was not Gandhi freeing India was actually not a very intelligent decision in the way that it was executed. It is fine to want freedom, but the way that it was executed was very poor in terms of, like, yes, they wanted freedom, but okay, you have to understand the situation. World War II has just ended, so like 1940s, 50s, right? Obviously, 1945 is when World War II ended, but after post-World War II ending, a couple years go by, obviously, Britain is not really able to maintain its territories because Britain just went through 2 major wars. They're bankrupt. They're like down on manpower. They need, there's just a lot of problems that internally Britain is facing. They're not really that capable of running and managing external, colonies, right? And also, obviously India is one of their major colonies. Under the British Raj, they're ruling India, and that's just kind of basically India as a unified nation is being run and taxed and obviously all that shit by Britain at this time. Okay, that's great. So, if you go back even more in history, this is arguable, but most of India is actually formed basically by Britain. Like the centralization of India, if you look before Britain, essentially, if you really look at it, India is similar to Europe in that there's so many different cultures. It's basically just a collection of different countries. And then India is essentially one form. Because if you look at it, if you go from one state to another, they speak different languages. They speak, they have completely different habits, food habits, everything. Yeah, they look similar, but when you go from one state, north to south, they're different countries. They're literally different countries. It's completely different. It's a 180 difference. So it's really like Europe, but I guess it's combined in that one small area. But anyway, if we go into India, like its actual formation, India's formation, yes, obviously the British were not necessarily like, yes, it's not like as if the British were like super nice people that were just like, oh yeah, we'll unify India. Obviously, there's a lot of war involved and a lot of internal bribery, shit like that going on, corruption, blah blah blah. And in order to get unification, yes, there was a lot of extraction. Yes, there was a lot of taxation, all of that shit. But you could think the unification of India would probably have never happened if it wasn't for British influence. And that's a fact because there's no way. It wouldn't have happened. So the unified India as a whole would have never happened without Britain. That's a fact. But aside from that, let's talk about India post World War II. Post World War II, India is now like a unified country, obviously, and they want freedom, right? Gandhi is now pushing for freedom. So they push for freedom, and they finally get freedom, and they basically, the British just leave. They straight up leave, okay? And essentially what happens is chaos. Because the thing is, you're asking basically, the thing is when the British were ruling, they had systems, structure, things in place. And that's the one thing that India didn't have. India had tons of population. It had, tons of natural resources. It had, tons of talent, essentially. But there's no real system in place, even till this day, for India to actually, put any of that to good use. Because if you think about it, what are the cards that India has dealt? If you think about it, if India had a good system like the U.S., like structurally, India has some of the highest talent in the world. India has some of the highest natural resources in the entire world. India has some of the highest populace. They have the highest population in the entire world. If this was used correctly, you would have a country that has higher GDP. It would have the highest GDP by a long mile. You know what I'm saying? But the truth is, it's just essentially the choices that were made post 1945 were some of the worst decisions actually ever. Because if you think about it, the British needed manpower at the time. They needed money at the time. They had the one thing that India never had, which is good systems awareness and talent awareness of how to actually run a country at scale, right? India had no idea how to do that. Before the British, like I said, they were just a bunch of groups, basically a bunch of tiny kingdoms, right? They were never a singular country. So the one thing that India never had, right, which was good governing and systems at scale, right, to actually manage and run a country, is what the British had. And the British were in a very desperate time of need. If India was smart at the time, they would have had a very... Because what ended up happening is they just left and it was chaos. And then, there was a separation between India and Pakistan. Hundreds of thousands of people died. I think it's a million people or some shit. So some crazy high number of people died because of there was killing on both sides. It was just complete chaos. Gandhi got killed, and there was like I said, separation of multiple states. This is just it was complete chaos. Many people died. It is total loss of productivity. And then essentially the effects of what happened are a very corrupt government. Till this day, India is probably one of the most corrupt nations on the planet. So it's till this day, productivity is being lost every single day because of the shitty systems that have been implemented. Anyway, at the time, the British India had the best bargaining chip at the time. They could have delivered manpower to the British. They could have, negotiated for, better, they could have had a smooth transition, you know what I'm saying? And the British would have been happy to do that because they needed manpower, they needed money, they needed all the things that India could have delivered. But I don't know, they just instead I guess it's what should have happened was a rally around, okay, let's have a slow transition to where we rule our country ourselves and make it very profitable and productive, and we build infrastructure and stuff like that. But I guess obviously you can never really, how do you really get a bunch of people to rally around that? It's much easier to get a bunch of people to rally around, free India, or whatever. But I guess, yeah. The thing is, Gandhi ended up, and obviously not intentionally, causing, essentially decades long of lost productivity, not only immediately after, because immediately after there was chaos, but also, the decades that follow till to this day, it's just not a productive economy, right? It's not compared to what it could be, given the talent, the resources, all that shit. But anyway, yeah, like I said, the ideal situation was that they negotiated and then got the systems and understanding talent from Britain and got that information and understanding transferred over first before, just like having them leave, and having complete chaos. But anyway, at the end of the day, like I said, it goes back to the same thing. They didn't understand fundamentally how running this. They didn't understand how important it was to understand how to run a country at scale. They didn't understand how important systems were. And is that really their fault? Not really. They were just they just didn't know. It's you don't know what you don't know. So it's really hard for you to sit down and judge these people. Oh, you did this wrong. You caused all this. They were doing the best they could, given the information that they had. So, but yeah, like I said, this is a totally random tangent. It was just kind of an analysis that I did. I don't know why I got into this, but yeah, it was just an analysis that I did. It's okay, well, what exactly is resulting in productivity? What results in productivity is good systems, right? Good systems, because you could have a ton of latent talent, but if you don't have a good system, it will never be put to any use. You could take the medieval society as an example, or you could take India today as an example, right? if there's no good systems in place, it doesn't matter how talented the people are or how much iteration they try to bring, it'll get diffused, right? In India, there's too much corruption, so all the talent gets kind of just squandered there. They're unable to build what they want to build. Back in the day, it was like if you started, 500 years ago, if you started doing things outside of the social norms, you would get basically shunned and killed, right? And basically, no matter how, there's no amount of talent or no amount of iteration that can really solve that problem, because the second you try to do anything, you get stopped from doing it, right? The system stops you. So what's the most important thing for iteration is actually a system that allows iteration to begin with. Anyway, totally random tangent. Totally irrelevant to the business. I just was, thinking about it. So yeah, that's the entire video. Other than that, one thing I wanted to say is that a lot of things sound good in theory, but fail at scale, right? And the whole thing about simple scales, fancy fails is that for something to be applied at scale, it has to be exceptionally simple. It has to be so simple, because otherwise the more complicated things you add, the more things that break down at scale. You can compare that to a country. You can compare that to the prison system, right? Why does the prison system work the way it does? Well, in small groups, it's easy to say, okay, the punishment is this, and please just do this differently next time, and then move on with your life. And it's easy to do that. But at scale, that fails, because it's impossible to customize. There's bias involved. It's just too much. It's hard. It's easy to quantify. It's easy to. Why is prison time the easy punishment? Because it's easy to quantify, right? In number of years. It's easy to dish out. It's very universal. It feels. It's super. It's easy to quantify. Universal to give out. It's you can write it down. It's simple at scale, which is why it may not even be the best situation. It may not be the best strategy, but is there an alternative that is simple, easy to implement, and also accomplishes the same objectives that prison does? So far, no. But you know what I'm saying? So anyway, but like I said, yeah, scale is the one thing that it really is the one thing that destroys a lot of good ideas, because a lot of good ideas will work, but not at scale, because it's not simple enough. It's not robust enough. Anyway, that's the video. I know this has been a long one. We talked about all the updates that has happened since the last video, the trials, all the stuff I'm working on now, more cold texting, obviously. All of that. We talked about we talked about the new metric system. We talked about how lead follow-up is actually a way bigger TAM than I originally imagined. It's it applies to not only small businesses, medium-sized businesses, but also it can apply to governments. It can apply. It's like $1 trillion type of problem that could be solved, or even more. And we talked about how understanding is already structurally guaranteed, and how it's inevitable now that everything that could be understood in the universe will be understood. And then we talked about scale, how scale isn't actually locked. It's just identifying the constraint of. It's just identifying the constraint of the system, solving the constraint of the system, and then getting to the next level, and ruthlessly doing that, and not getting fixated on optimization for non-constraints, basically. And then we talked about the female question part 4, and how there's no universal solution to an ever-changing problem, and how whatever it works for the metrics that you want should be the thing that you optimize for. We also talked about how relationship is a hyper-customized service where both parties are trying to make it as custom as possible, because a standardized relationship is the exact opposite of a good business. Good relationship is the exact opposite of a good business, in that a good business is standardized and scalable. A good relationship is extremely customized and unscalable. We talked about how evolutionary ideas of new and new experiences, stuff like that, is kind of a asinine thing. We talked about the July crisis and how that was probably one of humanity's greatest failures. We talked about India and how its formation was not exactly the best way to use the cards that they were dealt. And that's pretty much the entire video this week. I think we got through everything. Yep, we got through everything. So yeah, that's the video this week. A lot learned, a lot to learn. So yeah, for the next couple weeks, next few weeks, we're looking to do more cold texting. Hopefully I get some more trials. I mean, I know the $9.95 price is a little bit high. I mean, For what we deliver, I don't think it is. But yeah, I think it'll be harder because a lot of the spas that I'm contacting are really just self-ownered spas. They don't get that many new leads, so it's not really the right target market. But volume negates luck, and I know the service itself is objectively, metrics wise, is accomplishing everything I want it to accomplish and more. So it's objectively productive, and I think it's just doing it as much times, doing it with volume until we get those right clients, and just keep iterating, and yeah, we'll go from there. So that's it. That's the video. Good luck. Keep iterating, and gotta find the meaning. Understand the nature of the universe. Expand the scope and scale of productivity. That's what it is.